I've been doing this about 15 years now. I'm licensed in over 30 states. I started off just doing daily claims, pipe breaks and fires. Ended up starting doing hurricanes in about 2004, and my business just kind of changed to a catastrophic adjuster, dealing with mostly windstorm claims, whether it's hurricane or straight line winds, and then pretty much exclusively hail in the last few years. How many of you? Is that me?
It was your fault. It was your fault.
Figured that. Out of all of you here today, how many of you have worked with a public adjuster before? Oh, that's pretty good. Okay. And the rest of you are just trying to figure out what we do and when you need somebody. So that's the reason I'm here today, to explain what type of circumstances it may be beneficial to bring somebody that does what I do in, and when you don't need somebody that's a public adjuster. Basically, simply, public adjusters are licensed by each Department of Insurance to make sure the playing field is level when somebody has a loss to their property. The Division of Insurance realizes that the insurance company can send out an expert that represents the carrier, and they want to make sure that the property owner has their own ability to have somebody represent them and to make sure that they can recover what they're entitled to. A lot of the calls that I get from roofers all over the country is explaining to me, hey, you know, Eric, I got this claim, I got up there was damage, what do you think? And I have to kind of train these guys, what's a good claim to take? Because not every claim is worth everybody's time and effort and money to get involved in. And it's very important to give yourselves a checklist before you engage yourself and all your time and energy getting up on roofs and maybe meeting with adjusters to, you know, the long-term probability of successfully getting that roof paid for by the insurance company. In my experience, the bigger the claims get, the more difficult they become. You have to deal with general adjusters, the best adjusters, you get roofing consultants, engineers involved, and you have to anticipate that kind of a timeline. I guess that kind of steps moving forward is what you're going to encounter at the end of the day to get the roof replaced. It's very important to, and if I'm simplifying this too much for you people in here, I apologize, but I still run into this a lot. A lot of people get a claim signed up, they don't know what the actual date of loss is. Okay, they don't ask their client if they've ever been paid for any prior repairs. They don't know if there's pre-existing conditions, for example. A lot of times you get onto a claim and you meet with an adjuster. First thing they ask is, what's the date of loss? And in my business, and I don't know how many of you work with meteorologists in here before you get involved with a claim. Do you all get hail swaths, I assume? And okay. Sorry, this is not going very fluidly, so I apologize. Most of you guys know a lot about roofing, but may not know a lot about coverages, and this is where it gets tricky for everybody in here when they encounter some type of a denial from the insurance company, or a situation where you come out, you find damage, they acknowledge that there's damage, but they say that we think this is from the 2007 storm or the 2009 storm. So one of the basic things is that you guys may run into is when you start to get into coverage issues, if they're stopping you in your tracks or not. People being asked at appointments, are you acting as a public adjuster without a license, or doesn't happen too often? Okay. A lot of the claims that I get involved in, the biggest obstacle that needs to be overcome is getting a copy of the policy before you begin. I had certain situations where you're halfway through a claims process and you find out that the people don't have replacement cost coverage. They only have actual cash value coverage. They don't have a cosmetic waiver. They may have a cosmetic waiver, and they may not have code upgrade coverage. So it's very important to get coverages, a copy of the policy, review their coverages to make sure that you're not fighting for 6 or 8 months to get a roof replaced and find out that you're only working on 50, 60 cents on the dollar because that other money is not going to be recoverable. As far as code upgrade goes, there's several different policies. You could be on a multi-million-dollar commercial property. There could be 2 layers of roofing on there already. It could be damaged. The insulation could be wet. You know that the roof should be replaced, but when you replace it, you're going to have to bring it up to code, and some of these policies may only have $25,000 coverage for code. So then you're in a situation where your client's going to be upside down when you actually replace that roof and bring it up to code. And I don't know if any of you guys ever run into that situation. As far as being prepared when you sign up a new claim is another thing that I work with a lot of roofers on, is preparing the roof before there's an adjuster's meeting. And if you all do this already, that's great, but I've had many claims where I get a call from somebody and I get up for the first time and there's beer bottles and handguns and air conditioning parts all over the roof and old buckets, and that is not a great way to start off an insurance claim. You need to really prepare a property before you have a meeting with the insurance company, because as you know, first thing the adjuster does or the engineer does is they go right to that pile of debris and take a photo of it. You don't really pay attention to the damage that's on the roof. Secondly, as far as preparing, get to the property a little bit early and make sure you mark out all your damaged spots. And if you all do that, that's great. But being unprepared can be very detrimental when you first get up onto a roof and the adjuster's like, okay, just show me the damage, and everybody's not prepared. You have to really take the time to get there, circle all the hits, and be able to point out the damage as quickly as possible and make your case. And as well as, in my experience lately, the best way to do a claim presentation or get involved in a claim for you guys is to go to that first meeting with the hail swath, the date of loss, mark all the damages on the property, put together a detailed estimate on what you think the damages are that are going to put that property back to pre-loss condition. Some people have the mentality of, why don't I just go and meet with the adjuster and see what happens? And that's really not a great strategy at the end of the day. Everybody thinks, you know, maybe I'll meet with the adjuster, I'll get him on the hook, maybe he'll pay for a repair. That's okay, but it's always better to have to make the insurance company to react to you versus you always having to react to what they do. So my suggestion is, if you guys do your own Xactimate or you hire an estimating service, when you go to that first appointment, you basically just lay the groundwork for what you think needs to be done there. Mr. Adjuster, date of loss, here's the hail swath with the property under the hail swath, here's my Xactimate, here's the damage. And then they have to react to your claim presentation. Claim presentation is the most important part of everything that you guys do. You're going to know more about roofing than any of these adjusters. but it's not up to them to tell you what the claim is worth. It's up to the policyholder to prove what their loss is, okay? So basically, public adjusters are experts at claim presentations. And what I'd like to do for you guys today is, you don't need a guy like me on every claim. If you can do your homework and prepare before you get to a claim, you're going to probably get a lot more claims paid without having to go to second inspections or third inspections and making all these calls trying to get a re-inspect with a new adjuster, thinking that the new guy is going to say something different than the last guy. Every now and then you can get lucky and get a supplemental adjuster that comes out there and pays for something the first adjuster didn't. But it's better to come in right off the bat prepared. This went over the being prepared for the adjuster appointment. A lot of you in here are maybe commercial roofers, and one of the biggest obstacles I have to overcome in large losses is the insurance company coming out saying, we admit that this is hail damage, but we think it's cosmetic. And they say, you need to find the functional damage. There is nothing in an insurance policy that says you need functional damage to get a roof replaced, okay? This is all just their way of trying to make it more difficult for you guys to end up where you need to end up. It's either a small hit or a big hit. It doesn't matter if it's a hit and the roof is damaged. If they can't bring a property back to pre-loss condition with a repair, most replacement cost policies means you get new for old. Okay, so on the larger losses, first thing the insurance company comes out and says, this is over my authority, I'm going to bring in a roofing consultant or an engineer. Then they bring on an engineer. Now when you have an engineering appointment, that's, you have a choice. You can try and meet an engineer or a consultant on your own and go head to head with them. I think you can do that if you go to that property ahead of time, find the damages, and the real knockout punch is finding fractures in the membrane, as you know. And it's really, not all of them are that easy to find, and sometimes it takes hours on your hands and knees, literally, to find some of these fractures, taking a hit, cutting around it, flipping it over on the commercial claims and seeing if the backside is fractured. It doesn't matter if they send out an engineer or a consultant. If you can find the fractures through the membrane on these commercial roofs, you're going to have a very strong chance of being able to get the roof replaced all the way down to the neck. And I don't know how many of you in here get into that level of doing your own test cuts and cores and that type of stuff before a meeting. Insulation being wet. Your first thought is the roof is wet, they owe for a new one, you can't put another one on top of it, blah, 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 blah. Well, if the roof is wet, the insurance company is going to try and do everything they can to find that. Maybe it came in through some loose flashing or whatever it is. So if you're going to go with the wet insulation argument, which is great, you need to make sure that it's going to wind-created opening or hail impact, and whether if the perimeter of the roof is gravel built up and the perimeter has fractures in it, and they've acknowledged those impacts, but the field is wet, it's an argument, do I need to find a fracture in the field to get the rest of the roof replaced, or am I going to have to settle for just getting a repair of 3 feet around the perimeter, 3 feet around the HVAC curves, 3 feet around the expansion joints, and not get paid for the rest of the roof? And the way you guys have to come up with a strategy, you need to try and back into, how do I get the field of the roof replaced because it's wet? So you need to start doing your own core testing, finding where the insulation's wet, how far it got into the middle of the roof. Do you need aerial you know, do you need aerial infrared, thermal imaging? You guys might get into that stuff now. Best thing to do is maybe hire a company that does handheld infrared at first. And there's certain specifications that those guys and standards those guys work under. That's your first way of, again, trying to back into roof replacement. It's very important that you guys know, with your experience, you know before the insurance company comes out what they may possibly say on why they're not going to pay for that roof. And it's up to you to get the answers to those questions and have an answer when you have that meeting. So if you hire an infrared company, or maybe you guys get your own camera and you take the class and you do your own scans and you find the areas, it's very important that the following day that you verify those wet areas with a core test. I've had situations where I didn't know any better a few years ago. I hired an infrared guy. He said I have 46 anomalies in this roof. I went ahead and submitted a report. Insurance company hires an engineer. They come out and they start to do all the test cuts in the areas I said were wet, and it was 3 inches thick of asphalt. There was no moisture in the system. So be very careful about saying something's wet without verifying it. Physically doing the core and making sure that it's wet. Besides handheld infrared, there's aerial infrareds that a plane can fly over, give you an aerial shot of the entire bunch of buildings or one building. That's an expensive way to do it. It gives you an instantaneous snapshot of any moisture in the system, which again, then you verify that, you try and back into the damage that you see, verify it, and that may be a strong enough argument for roof replacement. I want to talk a little bit about overhead and profit really quick. Does anybody in here have trouble getting the insurance companies to pay for overhead and profit? Okay. Are you mostly roofing companies, or are you general contractors as well? A lot of times the insurance company takes liberties and just says, well, you know, it's XYZ roofing company, so you guys must not be involved in any of the other collateral damages, and think that they can just say, hey, you know, this is 80–90% roofing, we don't know overhead and profit. Well, that's why it's important to really pay attention to the other collateral damages, whether you sub it out or do it on your own, but you really should try your hardest to incorporate gutters, obviously, window damage, and I'm sure you all do it, but there is no, you know, sometimes there's no easy way to get overhead and profit. Sometimes you need to threaten maybe to go to appraisal, or, you know, speak with a supervisor, but, you know, it's not as easy as saying, I have 3 trades, you owe me overhead and profit, because the insurance company is saying, well, you know, it's 80 or 90% roofing, it's not a complex job, it doesn't warrant overhead and profit. So it depends state by state how much they enforce that type of stuff. But I think if you guys have a tendency to just kind of overlook the other little collateral damages, you should always try your hardest to incorporate those type of things to ask for the overhead and profit.